Hi, welcome to Course Requirement and Lab Setup. In this video, we're going to take a look at the course requirements as well as the tools we're going to use in this class. So for this course, we're going to assume some basic Python knowledge and some basic network engineering knowledge. For the basic Python knowledge, a good rule of thumb would be the Python Quick Start tutorial on python.org. That tutorial will give you an idea of what it takes to get Python up and running and some of the basic ideas such as function, class, and so on for Python. Of course, if you're a network engineer and only did the quick tutorial for the first time, some of the ideas and concepts and terms might seem foreign to you. So if you come across that later in the course, luckily Python is a community known for being inclusive, known to have good documentation, and the members are all willing to help each other. So feel free to, if some of the knowledge that seems a bit strange, feel free to go back and research on python.org or the various websites that provide tutorials. As far as the basic network engineering knowledge, if I have to put a benchmark, it would be somewhere between CCNA and CCNP. So for example, if we talk about BGP, you should know what a BGP is and what it does. Maybe not a super in-depth knowledge, but a mental idea of what BGP look like in, the syntax will look like in your network device of choice would be very helpful. And same thing that goes for access list or, interface configuration and so on. So some of the tools that we're going to use for this course are Python 3, and in particular Python 3.6. In my opinion, Python 2 is going away and it's now becoming legacy. There's never going to be a Python 2.8. So it's time for all of us to just start migrating to Python 3 if you're not using it already. So for us, we're just going to stick to Python 3.6 because that is, as of now, the recording is the latest version of Python. We're also going to use Ubuntu Linux for the long-term support 16.04. because we want to focus on the topic at hand as opposed to discuss the tools surrounding the topic. So for example, if we're talking about a concept in Python, we don't want to be discussing the different syntaxes of Linux or differences between Linux and Windows. So that is part of the compromise that we make, is just that stick to Ubuntu Linux and stick to Python 2.6. Of course, as network engineers, we're all very familiar with the terminal window. We use the CLI commands to get into the box to look at before and after changes and so on. So the terminal window is something that we're going to use. Also, we're going to use the Atom code editor that's built by the guys who were in charge of GitHub. So there's this Octocat army that's behind the Atom code editor. You could be sure that they have rapid development cycles. They're all just other programmers developing for programmers. So the Atom code editor does a good job in highlighting and syntax that's grouping together. So visually you'll get a good idea of what that code look like. And of course, because this is a hands-on project-based class, that we're going to have some network devices that we could enact on so that we could see the changes and we could make modifications. For me, I'm going to use Viro and sometimes GNS3 and sometimes real devices for the lab. But I want to emphasize that I try my best to actually make just the concept clear and apparent without really too much emphasis on the device. The device is the domain knowledge that it's assumed that you have. If you're managing, HP boxes, you're managing Huawei boxes, that domain knowledge is there. But even though we're using maybe Viro for Cisco, GNS3 for Juniper, or so on, that the same concept would be as applicable to you as somebody else who is not managing those devices, using Python to manage those devices as well. So let's take a look at some of the tools, just quick screenshots of some of the tools that we're going to use for the class. So as mentioned before, we're going to use the terminal window and we're going to use some of the quick commands such as ls for listing, cd for change directory, and sometimes even just a quick cat to look at the contents of the file. Next up, you could see this is the Atom code editor, and with the same file that we saw before in the terminal window, hopefully you could see that clearly. They have color syntax just to grouping, the def for the function and different variable name and different color syntax, and it's a little bit easier to read. So Atom code editor is what we're going to use to illustrate the Python code to make it a little more visually appealing to you. And what you see here on the screen is the VM Maestro, which is the front end to build your network. Sometimes running a local VM on your back end to actually construct a virtual network, and sometimes would be a cloud-based provider that does the network build for you. I want to emphasize again that whatever you use for your network devices, the concept should be transparent and applicable to you regardless of the vendor that you use. It's just that for this class, if you have VIRO or GNS3 that is more of a Cisco based network, you could also use the same thing in your network, but it's not a showstopper if you don't have VIRO or GNS3 and so on. And there you have it. Those are the tools, the requirements for the class. In the next section, we're going to start looking at automating your network.